Welcome to this webinar run by the British Council as part of our school English and school education work in France. We're delighted to have you all here today. My name is George Wilson. I'm the head of English and school education for the British Council in France, and I'm joined not only by our webinar lead this evening, Anne de Leon, but also by my colleague Solène Burt, who works in my team and will be leading this webinar. So over to you, Solène.
Thank you very much, George, and welcome everyone. It's great to see you coming from everywhere across France and beyond. Do continue to say if you're just joining us where you're from in the chat. Probably some just very quick housekeeping rules. If you're interested in closed captions or sous-titres, you can activate that in the bar in the bottom of your screen. Do write to us in the chat if you have any comments or questions. You can also use the Q&A button also in the bottom of your screen. So the British Council is the UK's international organization for cultural relations and educational opportunities. And in France, our team, which is made up of George and myself, we work to support the quality of English teaching, learning, and assessment, and we do that through 6 main areas. The first is through research, and you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen our latest report, which looks at the current landscape of CLIL in primary education in France. We also encourage different exchanges between French and schools in the UK, and the Schools Connect platform allows you to look for schools based in the UK who are interested in partnering, such as through pen pals or various opportunities with French schools. So I encourage you to go check that out. We also, our work also consists in sharing various information and best practices, and I'm going back for some reason. There we go. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see the workshop that we hosted in last November. Many of you attended. We hosted teachers and policymakers and researchers to discuss CLIL practices in France and in various countries across the world. We also are interested in sharing advice, and you can see an example from a workshop we hosted at the British Council on the creation of a language center within the new Cité Scolaire in Sartrouville. You might know about the Teaching Council resources available on the Teaching English website. That has a plethora of resources and teaching materials, podcasts, webinars, and trainings. Like this one. This is the training that we're having today is part of a wider series. The first took place in 2024. So the second round started last week with a session on teaching English through teaching math through English. And today we have the pleasure of welcoming Anne de Leon, who will host the webinar on teaching science through English. So if you want to stay in touch, I encourage you to sign up to our monthly newsletter if you have not already done so, and write to us. Our email is at the bottom of the screen. And so without further ado, I'm very pleased to welcome Anne de Leon. Anne de Leon is a teacher educator with over 20 years of hands-on experience, both as a primary teacher in the UK and as a language teacher across secondary schools in France. We're very lucky to have Anne de Leon today, who's going to share her unique background in CLIL science and cross-context teaching to guide us as we explore strategies to teach science through English. And I would also very much like to thank the Ministry of Education for supporting these webinars, and a particular mention for Réjeanne Moiton from the Académie of Dijon, who supported Anne in the preparation. So over to you, Anne.
Thank you so much, Selene. Thank you very much, George. And thank you to Réjeanne, who I cannot see on the screen, but hope she's here today, who was my kind of binôme when we worked on this webinar. Thank you very much. Hello to everybody, mostly from France. I saw some people from Portugal and Spain as well, maybe further. Oh, Congo, Brazzaville, hello. Many people from around the globe, which is fantastic. So, teaching science through English. We have a fair bit that we could talk about, but let's have a look at the session objectives first. So what I'm going to do is build the session so that we go from a review of the theory that you probably are familiar with. So we won't take too long on that, and we'll quickly move on to practical activities that we will link back to that theory. We will review what's key in CLIL in 2026, that should say. Apologies, I clearly compiled this before Christmas. Experience 9 practical, sustainable science activities. All activities in the webinars are activities that you can adapt to any topic and age range. We are going to have language frames for scientific inquiry. For those of you who went to Grisella, her webinar last year, she talked about language frame quite a lot. We're going to learn or review how to scaffold content and language in science and have ways to assess content and language. So, guess what we will learn about today? If you could type this in the chat box. Now you're thinking, well, it's very clear, it's in the title, but I'm going to present you with some words. Try to be as specific as you can. Take a minute to look at those words from the word cloud. What are we going to learn about today? Gaia says practical activity, Margot says experiments, and Laure says experiences, Jessica says vocabulary, and then it goes too fast. Fabulous. Thank you very much. Now, I'm going to give you a sentence. Read the sentence and try and see if you can find the word that goes underneath that little purple shape there. Today, we are exploring how to make science CLIL lessons that develop both language and... Okay, too broad. Try to go more specific. Oh, we're going more specific. We have observation, we have skills, we have many people saying content. But specifically, we're going to look at scientific thinking. And this is very specific. So what we want to be doing with our primary school learners is encourage them to be able to say, we think like scientists. So we are going to really go for those scientific skills, abilities, competencies that they will develop in science. So this is actually the first activity that I wanted to present you with. So word clouds for purposes and goals. The word cloud you can see here now, you will probably guess what the unit exactly volcanoes. Thank you, Sabrina. The unit we would be working on with the students would be volcanoes. Now, why use word clouds? They're so simple and so effective because what they do is they activate vocabulary. They introduce what it is that we're going to be talking about. they also encourage visual memory and recognition of the words. So, of course, if we're in the very first term of CP, which is the equivalent of year 1, when students are 5, maybe 5 to 6, word clouds would be tricky to use. We may start with very simple words, but as soon as they get into term 2 or term 3 of that year 1 of primary school, we can use them quite a lot. They're also very good for, my slides are slow to move, cognate awareness, which is our transparent words. So for example, if the students read eruption or active, dormant, or gas, they may recognize words in their own language, which already kind of starts helping them infer meaning. It's good for prediction. What do you think we're going to learn about today? Guess. And prediction is very much part of the scientific inquiry. It's a really good hook, therefore it engages them. It motivates them to know more. It will be useful when it comes to concept mapping, which means when we create a map of the learning that we are doing in the unit. It's pretty good for scaffolding, or building that structure that would help them reach their highest possible potential. It's also quite good for dual focus balance, which is the duality between the focus that we want to have on the content and on the language. And finally, it lowers anxiety. Instead of having a lot of text or something to listen to straight away, it's a few words, and it all depends on your context. You may have as many words as I've had here, but that's because I have you teachers on the call. If I had maybe a year 2 class, in classe de CE1, maybe I would choose 5 words. This is something that we can use at the beginning of a unit to introduce it, but it's also something that we can use at the end, and maybe we can get them to create the word cloud as a bit of a, let's encapsulate everything that we've learned in this unit. So this was our first activity, word clouds. Do you use word clouds already? Do you want to type in the chat if you use them or not, so that I can gauge a little bit? Oh, we have a perfect mix of yeses and nos. Okay. Okay. In France, in CEP and CE1, they are not supposed to read in English. Lydia, that's interesting. Okay. So maybe they're not supposed to learn how to read in English, because that would be confusing with the sound system, for example. But maybe recognizing words, being having something visibly written without spending too much time on the reading could be useful. So Sabine is also saying that she's reluctant to using writing. So then maybe if in your context this is what's happening, then from CE2, from year 3 on, we can start to use it. And maybe what you could do is, instead of a word cloud, is have a picture cloud. That could work as well. You'll see an example of it a little bit later on. Okay, thank you very much. I'm unfortunately not going to be able to see everything in the chats. It goes quite fast, but thank you very much for engaging in the chat as well. I know Solène and George are very much behind their screen and noting down questions and comments as well. So, all news but good news. We know that in 2026, student-centered approach is still essential, very much key. They do most of the work in class, not us. That's why we plan carefully. Scaffolding is still a key. The 4C framework is still valid. You've reviewed this. For those who went to Sarah Hillard last week on maths through CLIL, content, communication, cognition, and culture, those 4 aspects are very important to keep in mind as well. vocabulary support is still critical. And for that, we are going to talk about language frames. This is actually one of the tasks that you will have after the webinar for those of you who want to continue developing. Is all about language frames. And we know that mistakes are and always will be learning opportunities. So we want to encourage them and we want to help students reflect on them. Okay, breaking news, kind of. So the latest development, we know that we have moved from the neuromyth of the learning styles into multimodal scaffolding. So we are still using visual, verbal, and kinesthetic, but instead of saying students are categorized and put into boxes by learning preferences, we're actually encouraging colleagues to use multimodal scaffolding, meaning that we're going to use all of this, because as we now know and have known for a good while, we all work better with a mix of all of the input, the visual, the verbal, and the kinesthetic, meaning movement. There are some pauses because my slides are somehow not responding. Here we go. Higher order thinking skills, also known as HOTS. We know now that we want to make them more explicit. I'll go back into this in detail later on. Our higher order thinking is when our students get more challenged, and we want to make this type of learning, challenging learning, visible for them so that they learn to learn. Emotional and effective scaffolding is now recognized. We know that it's important to take it into consideration. We also know that translanguaging is now not only recognized, but actually encouraged in many places. It's obviously very context dependent. So depending on the country where you work and within that country, depending on your specific context, all the way down to your specific classroom, you may use it to different levels. Translanguaging is when we allow, so when we code switch, when we use both languages. For example, I teach in France. I'm going to work in both French and English and allow my students to work in both French and English. So that's going to be for me to identify. If they're in year one and it's their very first year doing any type of English, I won't have the same expectations as if they're in year three and they have done English for academic purposes for 2 years already. So allowing translanguaging can really also impact that emotional and effective well-being of our students. And what's kind of really new now, or very, very much recognized, is we like an inquiry-based approach. It's very much strengthened. So particularly in science, we know that inquiring, being curious, asking questions, and working out our own answers is what leads to deeper learning. So we are trying to do this. Okay, so the brief theory review, the 4 C's. I just wanted to give you some examples here. So content. For example, the life cycles, the states of matter, they're examples of content. Example of communication is the sentence stem, so the chunk of language that we're going to use. For example, I wonder why, that sentence, I wonder why, or je me demande pourquoi, probably will not come naturally to our students. So this is when we need to teach them explicitly that communication, as well as, of course, the academic vocabulary. The cognition, so the specific skills that they're going to work on in science. science as universal, international cooperation. Sorry, I was on cognition. I'm reading the chat at the same time, which is confusing. I should stop doing that. Observe is a skill that we want to be working on with them in science. Compare, analyze. Again, they wouldn't do this just by themselves or randomly. So this is all what we are going to encourage in science. And the cultural part is very important because science is universal. And it also helps developing, like creating a better world for tomorrow. I know it sounds very grand, but if we're considering a more peaceful tomorrow, then international cooperation is very important. And for us, CLIL teachers or primary school teachers teaching through a different language such as English, which is very much understood internationally and used internationally, we can really play an important role in that. So I told you before I would go back over the HOTS, and to go back to our higher order thinking skills, we need to start with the lower order thinking skills. So if you are familiar with those thinking skills that kind of build from memorization all the way up to creation, this is where our LOTs and HOTS are. So the LOTs are remember, understand, and apply. Specifically for science, what that means is your memory games, remembering. So name the 3 states of matter: gas, solid, liquid. It could be for them to review vocabulary and content. It's all their memorization. Understand is when they can explain. They've understood it, and the way they show it is they explain it. Apply is when they can actually, for example, here, identify the materials by state. So name the 3 different states, explain what they mean, sort the materials by state. We're going up the thinking skills. And when these are solid, when the LOTs are solid, we move up to the HOTS, which are the higher order thinking skills, when deeper learning happens. And that's when they analyze, for example, in comparing solid and liquid. So it'll be your typical, the Venn diagram with the 2 circles and an overlap in the middle. And if they can compare solid and liquid, differences, similarities, that's a higher order thinking skill. They then evaluate, for example, by answering the question, which state is best for, and then they choose. So they then have to exercise everything that they've remembered, understood, in order to evaluate before creating, which is, for example, designing an experiment. And this really takes them from sheer memorization, which is important. If they don't memorize, for example, the vocabulary or the scientific facts, they won't move up to the higher order thinking skills. But this is important for us to keep in mind, as I am sure you know. I've chosen here an example with the state of matter because that's an example I've taken later as well. The multimodal scaffolding. So remember, we have the visual, the verbal, and the kinesthetic. Visual is, for example, diagrams, photos, realia, real objects, videos. Verbal, we can use the language frames, so those chunks of language that we're going to teach them explicitly. Modeled speech that we model. Word walls, where we have a display of the vocabulary or the sentences that they're going to use. And kinesthetics, so movement. We may want to be the volcanoes ourselves. Manipulatives, particularly in science or in maths, just like you saw last week. building, acting, all of this is going to help the students really own their learning. So I've been talking quite a lot already. We're going to do a think, pair, share activity. Obviously, with 546 people, it's going to be difficult to pair. So I'm going to ask you to pair up with an invisible friend that you're going to invite. First things, I'd like you to think at the moment, how do you currently scaffold for learning? What is a strategy that you use for scaffolding? Take a few seconds to think about this. Well, you're now pairing up with your invisible friend. And you're going to share your strategy. Maybe you want to share it in your first, in your second, in your third language, whatever you feel most comfortable with. And of course, as some of you have already started, we're going to share our strategies in the chat. So type your favorite idea in the chat. Now, we have a lot of flashcards. Oh, Veronique is already using acting. Guillemette, experiences, Valérie, photos, Géraldine, Marine, Cécile, flashcards, Mélanie, videos, Geraldine, miming, Sophie, verbal and pictures, Sabine, drawing. Okay. Modeling, words wall, STEM sentences, you're already using some of this. Memory game, flashcards. Okay, thank you so much. You're doing so much. Rephrasing. Okay, thanks. That was Salome. Singing. That's lovely, Pauline. Sign language. Excellent. I can't read your name, sorry, but that's a great one. Chance, games, breaking down tasks into smaller chunks. Fabulous. Okay. The chat is really great to keep an eye on because between all of you, you have amazing things into place already. And Cyril is saying working in pairs with a student who has less issues about the task, possibly. So you could be using pairing in order to kind of maybe for emotional scaffolding as well. To kind of give them an opportunity, which is exactly what the think, pair, share routine is. So you give them some time to think on their own because we do a lot of collaboration, speaking, particularly when we're supposed to teach a language. So if we're teaching science through English, English is important. They still need time to refocus, and the thinking is not going to happen in English. So it actually could interfere with their thinking if we're continuously speaking or encouraging them to speak. So the thinking part of this activity is just you and yourself, 1 minute, think about the question. What do you think the answer is? But instead of cold calling, then we're going to pair up with another person. And as Cyril said, maybe we want to organize the pairs purposefully. Maybe we just want random pairing. Maybe we want the pairs to change regularly so that they learn to work with each other and we work on group dynamics. So we could really use this in many different ways, again, context dependent. And then we share as an open class. So by the time we share, we've had time to think about it. We've listened to each other's ideas with our pairs, and we're feeling more confident to actually talk in class. Okay. Model activities. So I went with le cycle 2, which for those of you who are not in the French curriculum national system, sorry, is CP1, so that'll be from 6 to 9, more or less. And I've chosen to go with Le Vivant, which is part of the national curriculum. That's great as well, Cécile. Think Pair Share is good in any languages, in the French classes and the English classes, definitely. And Le Vivant could be all the things from living things to the living world. So that we could go quite far into even philosophy, really. But let's stick to science for now. So, questionner le monde du vivant, question the living world. Or 6 to 9 years old. So what I've chosen for the first activities here is the life cycle of an animal. For example, expected outcome is to build the life cycle of an animal, or to draw the life cycle of an animal. The content is different life cycle stages, where we will have to identify the different stages of the life of animals, human and non-human, compare the different types of lives as well. And in order to do so, we are going to compare and classify different life cycle types and order. Ordering, sequencing is very important in science, just like it is in storytelling. So that's actually where our cross-curricular could happen. And our language for this will be typical of life cycle, egg, baby, young, adult, larva, metamorphosis. Our sequencing language will be first, then, next, after that, finally. It doesn't need to be more complicated than this, but we just need to make sure that we model it and they use it. And then the comparative structures, taking it to the higher order thinking when we compare bigger than, different from, the same as. First activity we could try is what we call a KWL chart. That stands for what I know, what I want to know or wonder, and what I've learned. So you could do this for those years from 6 to 9 year olds, so year 1 to year 3 included-ish. We could do it together with them. And then when they're in cycle 3, from 9 to 12, they can have their own. But so we could gather all the information. What do we already know? What do we know about the life cycle of animals? This is when our students are going to come up with all the, well, we know that there are babies, and we know that the babies come from the mothers, things like this. And then we're going to move on to the second column. What do we wonder? What do we question? What do you not know that you would like to know? And we're going to keep this logged in. So we're going to write all of our questions here in the middle column, because at the end of the lesson or the unit, we can go back to it, and that makes the learning visible. So that's a very efficient scaffolding tool. What we know, what we would like to know, and what we've learned. So now we know even more. What we can also do is agree and disagree stations. So I do it in 2 different ways. You can see here the picture on the left is a plus and minus, and you could have like a line that ranges from the plus to the minus, and use statements. So for example, I know, example of a statement, the tadpole, I saw tadpole in the chat there from Esmeralda. Thank you, by the way, for if you have any ideas of good books or anything, share them here. It's really good for everybody to kind of have those resources. So it could be, the statement could be, the life cycle of a tadpole is the same as that of a butterfly. Do you agree? Do you disagree? And if you have a plus and minus and like a range in between, students place themselves depending on how sure they are or unsure they are. And just like the think, pair, share, they can then kind of chat to the people next to them. Are you sure of this? Why are you so sure of it? And they can kind of exchange like this. Or you have another way of doing it, the photo on the right, which is, I agree, I disagree, I'm not sure, without a range. Then you have 3 clear groups. And so you use your agree or disagree station. This could happen at any point in the lesson, beginning, middle, or end. let's have more activities, but using la matière this time. So this is for les cycles 2 et 3. C'est dans les deux au niveau du programme national. The matter, the state of matter. And so here we are going to identify, for example, the 3 different states of matter, so gas, liquid, solid, and their characteristics. We are going to learn and to describe the cycle of water in nature by organizing or designing simple experiences on the changes of state. And for example, typically water cycle will be between gas and liquid, and identifying the transformations of water in the environment in the bigger picture. The language we will need: solid, liquid, gas, melt, freezes, evaporate, condense, or the language for cause and effect. So remembering that language is always vocabulary, but also functional language. So what do we use when we want to express cause and effect? When, because, so, if, then, like cause and consequences. And so all of these, we are really, you know your students best. So you know what they're going to be able to use. And it may be that you challenge them to just a couple of difficult words. Or maybe you can really go full on. Madame Moiton was telling me that some schools already have been doing CLIL for 4 or 5 years now, and therefore have a very high level of English. So you could really push their learning. And this is when we're going to work on that, when we really identify the vocabulary, the skills that they're going to work on. And speaking of skills, we're going to develop analysis, classification, categorization, establishing cause and consequences relations, hence the language that we have chosen. One of the activities that we can do is the categories activities. Go back to your invisible friend. I'm going to show you some pictures. I'm going to show you a picture cloud. And you need to sort them into categories. Which categories would you sort these pictures in? If you are unsure what the one on the right is, it's condensation, is the lid of a pan where water's been boiling and you can see the droplets. Okay, so we have people saying different categories: solid, solid and liquid, solid, liquid and gas, different states of matter, solid, liquid and gas. Perfect. I'm laughing because I did kind of make that pretty obvious, didn't I? But what's interesting here, though, is what's your grouping system? Why did you group them like this? It could also have been, well, some of them are contained and some of them are out, not contained, right? So maybe if I was to see that all of my students give the same categories, I may want to add another one that will open up a new door to wondering, oh yeah, I hadn't thought of that. There are 2 images here where they're contained and the others are not. So what does that mean? Encouraging them to identify why they grouped that way. Okay. And then, of course, we give them the language to explain it. So remembering we're in cycle 2 et 3, so we're kind of thinking higher levels. We grouped these together because this and this are similar because, and we start introducing that good, juicy language that we want them to use, the scientific language. These are different from those because, or they all have, and something that I have a tendency to forget, and I really need to kind of force myself to remember, is when I compare, it's not just differences, it's also similarities, right? And that's something that somehow the students really kind of leave aside, and I do too. I don't know if you're the same, but so having these kind of specific frames really help us stay on track as well. We could use graphic organizers. I'm pretty sure that you already use these quite a lot. So for example, fill in the cycle. You have a couple of question marks, you fill in the missing words, right? Building the unit word bank with condensation, evaporation, or describing the process. When water heats up, it turns into vapor. This is the kind of work that we may want to do with them as a bit of a game, a language game, and then we can have it on the word bank or on the sentence bank on the wall so that they can go back to it regularly all the time. They'll need a lot of modeling and repetition, as you know. Now, our gist statements, that's another activity that you can do. So we've had a few activities already. The gist statement, get the gist. Now, Madame Moiton and I were kind of wondering, how would we translate that in French? And that would be something along the lines of, tu captes l'idée? It's like, if you were to summarize this in one sentence, what would it be? Do you get the gist? The gist is this, like, really shrunken down summary is the essential substance of what we want them to remember. So, for you teachers, do you get the gist? Your challenge is to explain the water cycle in 20 words or less. How would you explain the water cycle in English in 20 words or less? I'm going to give you 1 minute to type your sentence in the chat box. Oh, I missed that. Sorry, Mariam and Valerie, you had some interesting categories, white and transparent, or white and other colors. Okay. And Natasha was saying, aha, so maybe adjectives and verbs. Natural and artificial. Very interesting. Super. That's great. Oh, the sentences are starting to come in. Thank you for kicking us off, Roxanne. Water changes of state according to temperature. Isabel is saying water has 3 different states depending on the temperature. Fantastic, thank you. Clémence, the water cycle depends on temperature. So we're along the same lines, fantastic. Samira is saying, whoops, it's jumping. Water evaporates, forms clouds, falls as rain, flows into rivers and oceans. It's almost like a poem, Samira. Then evaporates again in a continuous cycle. Absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for all your sentences. You're giving a lot. You're being very generous with your chat participation today. Okay, fantastic. Now I'm going to move us on, unfortunately, but keep the good sentences coming in because your colleagues can read them. I'm going to give you an example here. And this one is 16 words because some of you have cheated a bit. I'm pretty sure some of you have put more than 20 words in there. Water evaporates, rises as vapor, condenses into clouds, and falls as rain. The cycle repeats. Almost like Samira's. I wonder where you got it, Samira. All right. So this actually is a key activity to do because what it does to identify the gist or to teach our students to summarize is teaching them to extract the substance of what we're doing, which is very important. All right, little bonus. This is what I've noticed in my classes, and I've heard many teachers say to me for the past 15 years that I've been working on CLIL, it's always the same thing. Now, give me a thumbs up if you recognize this problem. The students stay silent when I ask questions. They give one-word answers. Yeah, right? I can see some thumbs up. They give one-word answers. Yes. water. Well, because. And they can't explain their thinking in English. Now, in science, explaining your thinking is really, really important. I've got a myriad of little thumbs up going up my screen there. Yeah, it is these are very common problems when we teach in CLIL. So really, the solution, and it's nothing flashy, it's explicit language frames for every stage. And that really, if our planning is going to go somewhere, it's not in fancy videos, it's in language frames. So instead of saying, why do you think that? And then crickets, because they don't know how to express it, we could say, use this frame. I think because, who would like to try? And then you model it yourself. They get to use it time and time and time again. Okay, stages of scientific inquiry. So this is important to remember, just so that we keep it in mind for ourselves, right? Because we're primary teachers, so we teach everything, math, language, everything. So remembering the stages is key. Observing, questioning, predicting, planning, explaining, comparing, and concluding. If we have some specific language for all of these stages, we're helping them tremendously. Observing, you can start very, very low with I see, I observe, or I notice when they're already a little bit higher. Questioning, I wonder why. Predicting, I predict this because, and encourage them to push their thought. Planning, first, then, finally, we've already seen this. Explaining, this happened because. Again, it sounds very simple, but they don't know it. They don't have it. So we need to give it to them. Both, but for comparing. And for concluding, we could just simply go with in conclusion, and there are many others. Now, I have prepared in the follow-up task for this webinar many examples of language sentences that you could give your students per stages of inquiry. So do go at the end of the webinar, have a look at it, and choose the ones that you can own for yourself and you think are going to be the best for your students. But it's all there for you. Examples by thinking levels, just to kind of join back to what we were thinking about before. I see is observing. It's part of the lower order thinking. I know that is remembering. It's part of the lower order thinking. But again, it's facilitating that language that they will need to be able to eventually fully express themselves in English. So all of this is on the slides, and you will be able to download this at the end of the webinar. More modeled activities for the Earth, the planet. I'm going to go straight to the activity just because of time. So feel free to go and have a look at it, but you see how it works. Every time I've taken the expected outcome, the language, the cognition that you can work on. The question jar. Story time in English. We're reading a book about composting to save the planet, or the jungle. Students write their questions about ecosystems, put them in the jar, and then in science, we can open them up and answer them. We need to model the questions. Again, they won't know how to do this. We could write the questions with them. For example, what do decomposers do? Why do we need plants? What if one animal disappears? Another very simple activity is using a thread. Ça, c'est un bout de laine. It's nothing more fancy than that. And you build a web. So for example, you have your cards or your photos and a piece of string, and how will they make all of these words make sense together. The sun, the grass, the rabbit, the fox, the decomposer. And just remember your multimodal. We need to also be kinesthetic. This fits in your pocket. Use it as often as you need. And then this type of question for wondering, what would happen if all rabbits died? That in itself will take your students to higher order thinking skills, because they can't just remember facts. They'll have to engage in, oh, what will happen actually? And that is your scientific inquiry. So they'll really engage with this there. Of course, you give them the language as always. So remember to go back to it as often as you want. Your word wall, you can co-create with them, and you could have different categories. Don't settle for just vocabulary words. Go for process words, observe, measure, compare, and they can all do it. They can do it from as young as 5. Content words such as ecosystem, producer, predator, obviously, but also connecting words. Because, therefore, however, these are words that we don't necessarily think of, but they're the words that mean that the students can't string a sentence together. So they're good to have on the word wall as well. And all your academic language as well, of course. You can add drawings, you can color code, you can do all of this. Okay, now I wanted to touch on assessment. Think about our activities from today. Started with the word cloud and we moved all the way down to the string, I think was the final one. When could you use them for assessment? Bye, Nadej, thank you. When do you think you could use them for assessment? If you could type in the chat box when you think you might use a specific one. Or maybe I've lost you at the end of the webinar. Oh no, it's all coming. You're still there. Okay, Roxanne. Roxanne, you are the chat ninja. This is what goes to you for today, because you're the first one typing in every time. So Roxanne is saying the summary under 20 words, so get the gist. That would be brilliant assessment, wouldn't it? The word clouds could be, oh, everybody's going for the word cloud or the gists. Okay, most people are going for the word cloud or the gist. The word wall can be one as well, Natasha and Laure, exactly. Actually, yes. Okay, so they're all coming in now. Alexandra is saying the flashcards. Sophie is saying the KWL chart. And the agree and disagree, and I'm not sure, also by Alexandra. Okay, so really, all of these activities could be used as assessment. And these are the kind of things that you can assess. For example, I can assess that my students are using the observation language. I can take notes that they're doing it and to what level of proficiency. I can also check that they can make predictions, they can ask scientific questions, they can explain using evidence, they can compare 2 things or more, they can summarize. Oh, apologies for the spelling mistake there. Learning, not learning. They can summarize learning. So that's your gist, for example. Or if you wanted to do a word cloud with them at the end of a unit, that's the summary of their learning as well, or it could be. So you could really be very creative with all of those activities. If you use them with your students already, or if you wanted to introduce them, see how you could use them as assessment, because then for their emotional kind of well-being as well, if there are the type of tasks that they're used to doing in class, then the assessment doesn't become that kind of scary, and now there is an assessment or un contrôle, no? So it could be interesting. I've put here, these were produced. Yes, this one was produced as well. I forgot to put it here, I think. Right. So these were produced, I use AI for rubrics. I use Claude for Anthropic. I think for the French government, the l'Éducation nationale recommends Mistral because it's the French AI. If you're in Spain, Alia, I think, is the one that the government recommends. I'm not sure in Portugal or in the Congo, or in Brazzaville, sorry. But these are the kind of things that you could do. You could encourage them to self-assess, like here or here. This is specifically for team skills. I listened to my partners. I shared my ideas. So you could really go as specific about content or language, or as communication. Remember your 4 C's. You could really assess any of these. Oh, here we go. The name of the AI is here if you wanted to use it. Just remember when you use AI, be super specific. I'm sure you all know that already. You probably have had many training sessions on this. But this could be really interesting for them to use as self-assessment. Now, obviously, with all those words here, this will be more towards your CM1, CM2, which is your years 4, years 5, year 6 as well. You could do this because this is quite full on. So you might want to keep this one for yourself and use the little smiley facey ones for them. But so all of these are very useful, identifying their strength and their next steps in both content and language rather than only one. This is all interesting for you to remember for the assessments. We have 3 minutes left, and I can see some people are already leaving. Thank you very much to all of you who are leaving for attending. Before you leave, everybody else, we're going to have a couple of questions, but exit ticket, which thing new to you will you try in your next science CLIL lesson? Sabine is saying the water cycle. Rafaela names verbs of action. Flora is going to try the gist. So is Romain. So is Anne-Laure. Okay, fantastic. I think the gist and the word clouds are quite successful. All right. Oh, George and Selene have appeared. Hi. Sorry. On the next slide, you have the key takeaways for today's session, so you can have a look at them when you download the webinar, the slides as well. Apologies for running over slightly, Solène and George.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Anne, for this very interesting lesson. And thank you to all for being so interactive and engaging in the chat.
Yes.
Maybe we have time for just one quick question. I see one from Minani. She asks, do you advise to create a kind of lesson about how to communicate in science, or a written display in class is enough?
Well, I think that's a wonderful idea, Melanie, and I would encourage you to have a look at the post-webinar task because it will help you do it. I think communication really is one of the key. It's one of the 4 C's, and without the communication, they can't actually express what it is that they have learned. Therefore, I would really encourage you to plan specifically for how to communicate in science. That would be absolutely wonderful for your students.
Lovely, thank you, Anne. So 1 minute to go. Just to let you know that the recordings, the post-webinar activity that Anne mentioned, and not 1, but 2 lesson plans actually are available on our website. So I put the link in the chat to have access to that. Please also complete the feedback form. It really helps us as we plan future webinars. And it's also a way for you to claim your certificate of participation at the end. I'll put the link again in the chat. This is where you can access all materials. So the presentation slides from today, the recording will be up tomorrow afternoon. The post-webinar activity and 2 lesson plans. And next week, we have a webinar on teaching sports through English. And the week after that will be arts and music.
Thank you very much to everybody.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Selene, and thank you everybody for taking part. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. I'm loving the little emojis. I don't know who they're coming from. That's fun.